Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another weekly reading update. So this week I did not read a whole lot of books. I only finished one book and made some progress in another book and some more progress in another book and started another book. So I'm doing that thing that I do sometimes where I just want to read all of the books, and so I kind of start a bunch of them, but I also just feel like I'm reading so many different things. Like I just finished a fantasy book. I'm currently in another fantasy book. I have a historical romance going on my Kindle still. I know it is getting finished this weekend. I promise. I hope. And then I am also just started a mafia romance. So I've got a lot of different things that are going. So let's go ahead and talk about the book that I read this week. The one book that I finished is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. So this is a standalone fantasy book, and I believe it came out a few years ago. And quite honestly, I loved this book, and I also feel like this is nothing like I was expecting, and I don't know that this is going to necessarily work for everybody because it is told in such a beautiful, thoughtful, but very, what is the word I'm looking for? In a way that is uncommon. It's just certainly not common at all, the way that this story is told. But I cannot think of another book that I have read that uses the structure of storytelling as well as this one does. Like, when I tell you that I was literally, like, my jaw was dropping the whole time I was reading this, just because I was so incredibly impressed with the way this story is being told. So the overall premise of this is we have a young boy and his grandmother and Lola. The book opens when he's basically sitting at her knee and she's telling him stories of their history. And the book opens telling you that in second person, which is unusual unto itself. I can only think of two other books that I've read that are in second person. One is The Fifth Season, which this is often compared to. And I feel like that's kind of where I think the comparison really ends, because this book is not anything like The Fifth Season. Maybe some similarities, but it's its own creation entirely. And then A Dowry of Blood, which is also told in second person, but that's largely epistolary, so you're getting stories, or you're getting the story told in letter format, so it makes sense for that to be in second person. And again, it makes sense for The Fifth Season to be in second person if you've read it. And likewise, this book makes a lot of sense to be told in second person. But that's not the only point of view you have. You also have first person, and then you have third person. So you have all of those different point of views combined in this book. And from the moment I started reading this, when I read the very first paragraph, I knew this book, I felt like I had greatness in my hands. Like, I was so overcome, almost to the point of tears, with the beauty and power that is in this first paragraph. And it's not just beautiful. Like, I say it's beautiful, but the words themselves are kind of ugly. It's creating this feeling that is just visceral and strong. But the way that he puts words together, the craft of this book is beyond compare. It is truly beyond compare. It's incredible. So I know I'm gushing. 5-star read, obviously. But so the book begins when his Lola, his grandmother, is telling him stories of their past, of their history. And it's a very magical tale. It has a lot of like folklore elements to it, and even I would say some magical realism to it, where it just feels like things are just defying any type of reality. It's purely imaginative, and it doesn't have like a solid base in a magic system, and it doesn't need to, because it relies so heavily on folklore and things like that. But pretty soon as we're reading and she's telling him the tale, then it slips into first person and then third person, and then it will go back. And it has this effect of almost like a nesting doll. These are stories that are nested within themselves, like a Russian doll, where not only are you the main character in the second person point of view, but then you are also watching in this live theater, the grand theater that is where the rest of the story is taking place, where we get to see the greatest stories of all time that are told on this stage. So in that way, it also feels very much like a play, like you're a spectator at the play. And on these stories that are told on this stage, like, mortals can go to this inverted theater and you can witness these stories, but you only go through your dreams and you don't get to choose which stories that you see or which stories or when you get to see them. And then when you wake up, the only thing that you remember is just this feeling that you had. You don't get to remember all of the details. So it's such a fascinating use of perspective and point of view and storytelling and also it's just so seamlessly done. It's just incredible. So the story that we're witnessing then is we have these two boys, these two warriors, and they are transporting this ancient goddess across a broken land to try and end the tyrannical rule of her descendants. So that's probably the majority of the story. That's what we're seeing. And the events that happen in there are at sometimes so ethereal and so beautiful, but at other times they are just so, like, eviscerating. This has an element of horror that I was not expecting, both in terms of body horror and shock and even just the idea of it. You know, I talked a few weeks ago about Between Two Fires and how I felt like there was an element missing in there of horror where the characters didn't have the realization of something horrifying happening. Like, you have that in spades here. So I feel like there is a touch of horror in here, and it's quite gruesome at times, but it's also not done just over the top. It's not done in a gratuitous way. It feels like everything is done with such a specific purpose, and that's something that I just feel overwhelmingly about this book. This book is full of purpose. Every single thing in this book is so clearly well thought out, is so clearly in this exact specific place with these exact specific words. His word choice is stunning, and not only is it a beautiful choice of words and how he's putting them together, but he's not using too many words. He's being very, very spare with the words that he's using, and it has so much impact, and it's just incredibly stunning. These two warriors, you grow to feel for them so much, as part of them they're realizing things that maybe they hadn't realized before. In some ways, this is a little bit of a love story. There's a very famous line in here that says, let's see if I can find it, this is a love story down to its blade-dented bone, and it is just so... Like, that's the type of prose that you're getting in here, you know? Prose that is direct and impactful and is also a little bit surprising in the way that he pairs his words together, and it is just so stunning. You fall in love with these characters as they're on this journey, with our main character who's hearing the story from his grandmother, and it's just at times you don't know what is real and what isn't real, and that's how our main character feels as well. It's just... Honestly, I can 100% say this book is going to sit with me for a very long time. Like, I will never be able to forget this book. It was a near transcendent reading experience, and it was surprising at every page, but also not in a way that felt like, well, that doesn't belong here. It was surprising in the way that you could tell, on looking back, I could tell the author was leading me to this point, but at the same time, I was surprised when I got there, which, again, just speaks to the excellent craft that is in this book. It's so incredible. But at the same time, I feel almost a bit of hesitancy to recommend it, because it requires a lot of focus and a lot of brain power, and not only just in keeping with the story as it switches those points of view, but also just because of everything that is happening. So much is happening here in this book, and it's beautiful, it's stunning. It kind of ripped my heart out in a lot of places, and at the end I was just left feeling just overwhelmed and just in awe. This book almost moved me to tears so many times, and it's just fabulous. It's a stunning book, and I loved it. I loved it, and I'm kind of speechless. And it doesn't have a lot of reviews on Goodreads. I think it has like 6,000, but it also doesn't have a lot of awards, and I feel like this is the type of book that was severely overlooked when it was published, because it deserves all of the awards. This is an experience that I have never had before, and I've read a whole lot of books in a whole lot of genres, and this was fantastic. So I highly recommend it, but just go into it knowing you are probably not prepared for what's in these pages, because it was stunning. It was a thing to behold. Okay, so that's the only book that I read. It took up my whole week, took up my whole brain power. I did make a little bit further progress on the Julianne Long, which is taking me forever. I read this physically, and then, because I've tabbed it up some, but then I would also listen to the audiobook, and I feel like I feel like you should start this book physically before just starting the book in audio form, because then you get to see how the author transitions in different points of view. And when I was listening to the audio, you can tell that the narrator, like, his inflection changes as he switches the point of view. So you're not like left like, wait a minute, we were talking to you and now all of a sudden we're in first person, and then, you know, like, so that helped me to really understand, like, okay, this is where the story is going. So I did both audio and physical for this, which is my favorite way to read. And then the Julianne Long, which I'm just loving this so much. This is just so fantastic, but I'm going to save all of my thoughts on this until I'm completely done with it. But I will be very surprised if this isn't a 5 or 6 star read. This is peak historical romance. Fantastic. I talked about it last week. I don't really have much else to say. I'm going to finish it, I promise. And then the other book that I was reading last week is The Rage of Dragons. This is also an adult epic fantasy, and I am this far into it, so a little bit more. This was actually the book that I started before The Spear Cuts Through Water, but my audiobook hold coming due for The Spear Cuts Through Water, and I wanted to try and see if I could utilize that, and I did. So I have the audio for this on Spotify, and again, I'm just loving this so much. When I talked about this last week, I think I said it was something like, or I had heard that it was like Gladiator meets Game of Thrones, and I think that for me, it is Black Panther meets Game of Thrones. Like, that is the vibes that this book is giving, and it is fantastic. The narrator is amazing. Something that I do want to just comment on really quickly before I don't want to do a full review, but something I'm very impressed with is how he's building this main character. And he starts out sort of innocent, and he knows he's going to be a warrior, but he wants to just marry the girl that he's in love with and raise a family. He doesn't want to go to battle. He doesn't want to kill people. He doesn't want to potentially die, but he knows that's what he has to do. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see him really want and yearn for this very simple life and sort of mourn that he's thinking he's not going to be able to get it. So it's fabulous. I'm really, really enjoying this a lot. And then the book I started today is Broken Whispers by Neva Altaj. This is a mafia romance. She's a very popular author. I think that if you read mafia romance, you've seen it going around. I'm sure everybody but me has read it. This is my first one by her, and I am super impressed with this. This was the perfect read for me right now, coming off of the heels of 2 really epic, very... I needed to use like my whole brain, specifically with The Spear Cuts Through Water. It's very nice to just ease into this and just be told a really beautiful, well-told story. It's a simple story, Beauty and the Beast vibes. She's a ballerina, she doesn't speak. He is a mafia boss, and he, you know, is scary and fearsome, and he's got a lot of complexity to him, and he is just so completely obsessed with her in a most beautiful, positive way. He is smitten with her. He thinks about her all the time. He thinks she's beautiful. And they're warring mafia parties, clans, I don't know what you would call them. They have this arranged marriage coming through, and it's brought up, you know, who's going to marry her, and he says, well, I will, because he's been obsessed with her for a really long time. So they have an arranged marriage, and the way that he takes care of her, is so freaking beautiful. I can't even tell you. It is like filling me up inside watching this big, rough man be so gentle and thoughtful and to take care of her and be very protective. And those are all the elements that I want in a mafia romance, and it is delivering. So I'm having a great time with this. It's a very short audiobook. It was on sale for like $5, and I'm just having a fantastic time with it. So that's what I'm currently reading. Clearly most of my reading is via audio right now, except for when I need to read physically, that and the Julianne Long. So that's what I read this week and what I'm currently reading. Priority is for, I mean, the audiobook is going to be, I'm going to do the Broken Whispers as sort of a palate cleanse before I get back to The Rage of Dragons, just because I feel like my brain needs a little bit of a break. So then, Broken Whispers, Rage of Dragons, and then the physical book I'm going to read this weekend is My Season of Scandal by Julianne Long. So hopefully that's what's going to happen. So let's do a really quick book haul, because I did go to Barnes & Noble. My husband took me there to go and get the new Lore Olympus that came out. This is the 6th volume. I love Lore Olympus. I've talked about this a lot. This is a webtoon. Now it's printed in book format, modern retelling of Hades and Persephone. If you like Hades and Persephone, you have to read this. It's so freaking good. I love it so much. And then I also picked up a couple of fantasy books. I've had my eye on this one for a while. I've never read Mark Lawrence. He is high on my priority of fantasy authors that I want to read. This one is The Book That Wouldn't Burn. All I know about this is we have a boy lived his whole life trapped within a book-choked chamber older than empires and larger than cities, and then the girl has spent hers in a tiny settlement out in the dust where nightmares stalk and no one goes. The world has never noticed them, but that's about to change. So it says their stories kind of spiral around each other. I've heard really good things about this. I'm fascinated with it. I think it sounds great. And then this one is a book that I actually have started on audio before. It's called The North Wind. It was just recently republished traditionally. This is by Saga Press, which I actually haven't heard of before. But this is basically a mortal woman, an ageless god, a union that will save the world or destroy it. I think that Chelsea with the goats on here, I don't think she does booktube videos anymore, but she recommended this to me years ago, and I started it, but I wasn't really vibing with it, so I kind of DNF'd it. But then I saw this beautiful edition and I was like, I want that. It's buy one get one half off for the Mark Lawrence in this one. So I did, and I had a coupon and I bought it. This is a fantasy romance adult. I'm super stoked about this, and I want to try and read this physically because when I tried the audio, it didn't super work for me. So I don't even really remember much of it about it, but I've heard that if you like ACOTAR, you will like that one. And I'm in the mood for fantasy romance again. I'm just in the mood for all kinds of books. That's all I want to read, is just all of them, you know? So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Thank you for joining me for another weekly reading update. And let me know what you read this week that was good. And if you have made it this far, hopefully it's okay to still do the emoji pick an emoji. Please leave me a blue emoji of any type. Heart, flower, whatever's blue. Leave me something blue down below. And I'll see y'all in my next video.